What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be having a look at the best guns in Warzone. And there are some big surprises on this list. You guys will probably never guess what number 1 is on this list until we actually get to the end. Because while some of the usual suspects from multiplayer are in here, there's several guns on this list that aren't that great in regular multiplayer, but are really dominant in Warzone. Now, this isn't going to be a video just based on feel, like I used a gun once and had a good time with it, therefore I think it's the best gun. This is based initially on the statistics, and we're going to break that down, and I'm going to explain exactly why these guns are the best guns. But just know that I've also backed this up with gameplay experience for each of these. I wanted to test them to make sure they actually worked in practice and not just in theory, and there were actually a few that I ended up eliminating from my list that seemed like they would work in theory, but then when I actually got into a game, I found too many downsides where it just wasn't working out. So, hopping right into this, the first thing we want to look at when it comes to Warzone and finding out which guns are the best is damage per second, or DPS. Now, in regular multiplayer, typically we focus on time to kill because everyone has consistent health, but as soon as you start throwing armor into the equation and now people have different amounts of health depending on how many armor plates they have on, this is where DPS starts to make far more sense than time to kill. Now, just for you guys, I threw together a little spreadsheet with DPS. I will leave that link down below so you can check that out. I've also got a few other interesting things like how many shots it'll take to kill with each gun depending on how many armor plates they have on, as well as the time to kill values depending on how many armor plates they have on. But keep in mind with that chart, it is fairly simplistic and it only looks at the maximum damages for those guns. So at longer ranges, it won't necessarily apply, but at the same time, you should be playing to the strengths of those guns, so like you shouldn't be trying to snipe somebody with an SMG, for instance. Now, DPS isn't absolutely everything, it's just kind of the starting point. So there are a few guns that are really high on the DPS scale that I won't be including in my list because they're just not versatile enough. Or in the case of like the M4A1 with the 458 SOCOM rounds, that has an incredibly high DPS value, but the magazine capacity is just so low that it's not really a great option in my opinion. But now that we have all that out of the way so you know how I'm approaching this, let's hop into the list. And this doesn't really make that much sense to rank from like number 10 down to number 1 because some of these guns are just competing in different leagues. Like I am going to be recommending a sniper, but I've also got a couple shotguns on this list. So let's actually get those two categories out of the way first. Let's start off with sniper rifles. So with the sniper rifles, and I guess I'll include the one-shot marksman rifles, the Mark II and the Kar 98 in this, if the enemy ends up having full armor and you're using a sniper rifle, you can only get a one-shot kill with the HDR and the AX50. And this is, of course, with a headshot. For all of the other ones, even if you're shooting them in the head, you're going to get a hit marker if they've got full armor. However, if they don't have full armor, then you still do have a pretty decent shot at getting that one-shot kill on them. But I think most people would agree that having that one-shot kill potential to the head, no matter how much armor the enemy has, is a very attractive option, and therefore, I've narrowed this down to the HDR and the AX50. Now, a lot of people assume that the HDR is going to deal more damage than the AX50 because it fires a little bit slower, but that's actually not true at all. They have the exact same damage profile, and the AX50 fires a little bit faster than the HDR, so you get that follow-up shot off a bit faster. And as a result, I definitely lean a bit more towards the AX50. They're both just fine, but the AX50 is technically a little bit better. Next up, we're going to dive into the other extreme, which is extremely close ranges. And for this one, I've actually got two shotguns that are both incredible for this mode. Like, they are absolutely dominant in close quarter situations, even when the enemy has a ton of armor on. These are the R90 and the Origin 12. Now with the R90, in really close quarter situations where you should be using it, two well-placed shots where you're hitting plenty of pellets in both of those shots will kill even a full armored user, and you can get those first two shots off in very quick succession. So if we're looking at raw potential, the R90 is better than the Origin 12. However, the Origin 12 is a little bit more consistent in its damage. So you're not going to get those two shots off super quickly, but the moment you would need a third shot with the shotgun, this is where the Origin 12 is now better than the R90, and therefore it's a bit more forgiving to use. In either case, both of these are incredible close quarters weapons. If you're inside buildings challenging people, you are going to dominate with these two shotguns. Now, let's move into the more standard weapons, so like ARs, SMGs, LMGs. Let's just get the usual suspects out of the way here. The M4 is definitely on this list. It's not the best in Warzone in my opinion though, like it is in multiplayer, but it just can't be denied here as well. It's very accurate. You've got an excellent potential magazine capacity of 60 rounds with extended mags, which is very important in Warzone. You definitely want to be focusing on magazine capacity because of just how many shots it's going to take to kill a single person, and you might be dealing with a full team at once. So it's got that going for it. It's also very accurate. It's got a solid fire rate, so it's relatively forgiving if you miss a few shots here and there. And it's got half decent DPS values. It's not even close to the best in the DPS department, and that's why it's not number 1 on this list. But it's decent enough that you should have no problems using it. We see a similar thing with the MP5. Again, this gun is completely dominant in regular multiplayer modes, and it still carries that power over into Warzone. It's still a very solid SMG, assuming you're treating it like an SMG, of course. So yeah, just like with the M4, it's still very good in Warzone, but not necessarily the best. Additionally, I also have the Kilo 141 on this list, and once again, it is a very similar story to the M4. It's got a great potential magazine capacity, it's extremely accurate, so therefore you can challenge people at pretty long ranges with it quite comfortably. But the only problem with it is it's not very high up at all in the DPS department. So it's still very good, still very usable and versatile, but you are going to be beat out by pretty much every other gun that's coming up on my list. And this brings us to the next one on my list, which again is a pretty powerful gun in regular multiplayer. This is the MP7. I actually prefer the MP7 over the MP5 in Warzone, even though the MP5 has a bit of a higher DPS value. The MP7 I feel is just a little easier to control the recoil on, plus you have that potential 60 round magazine, whereas the MP5 has a potential of only 45 rounds, and this just makes the MP7 a more attractive option for me in my opinion. But those are the boring ones we got out of the way that there's really no surprise that they made the list at all. The next one I've got on here though is the Ram 7. Now the Ram 7 has a really good DPS value, it's got a potential 50 round magazine which is quite solid, and really good handling stats as well. It definitely beats out the M4 in most situations, aside from really long ranges, because I would say the M4 is a bit easier to control recoil on for those longer range shots. But in more of those mid-range style fights, the Ram 7 is clearly superior to the M4. Now after that, we're going to move into the LMG category. The best LMG, in my opinion, for Warzone is the PKM. Now, assuming you're hitting those upper torso shots, the PKM has an amazing DPS value of 430, which isn't the best in the LMG category. It's not quite as good as the MG34, which has a ridiculous DPS value, but the thing that makes the PKM superior to the MG34, in my opinion here, is its magazine capacity potential is insane at 200 rounds. It's also far more accurate and easy to control compared to the MG34, and its overall handling stats are just better. So this is why in the LMG category, the PKM is absolutely the best for me, and this is definitely a top 5 weapon to use within Warzone. So now it's finally time to get into the big surprises. These are the guns that I never would have expected to be anywhere near the top of my list, but I actually feel these are the best guns that you can possibly use in Warzone. First, we have the FAL. Now the FAL has a very, very good DPS value of 450, assuming you're hitting those upper torso shots, but on top of that, we also deal insane headshot damage. And this means you can be peeling armor off really, really quickly on people if you're managing to hit those headshots. Because keep in mind, just in case you didn't know, armor does apply to the head in this game. Armor really does essentially just add health to your total health pool. It might not seem like it would cover your head, but it absolutely does. However, with the FAL, you can peel that armor off so quickly, and even if you're not hitting headshots, if you're just hitting upper torso shots, it's only going to take you 5 bullets to kill a person with full health and full armor, which no other regular sort of gun can do in Warzone. To top all of that off, this gun is very accurate, very easy to control. I actually really like the fact that it's semi-auto. It makes you think about your shots a little bit more. And even in really close quarters situations, I find myself often beating SMGs and full auto assault rifles with the FAL, just due to the fact that it puts out so much damage so quickly. So it's a great gun up close, it's an excellent gun at mid-range, it's completely dominant at mid-ranges, and then at long ranges, it still has a good amount of power. Even against sniper rifles, you can often be putting them down before they can land their shot on you due to the flinch that you're going to be causing them. So if you haven't given the FAL a go, definitely do it. I think you're going to love it within Warzone. But semi-autos aren't for everyone, and this brings us to number 1 on the list, and this was a huge surprise to me, and I'm sure you're going to be surprised as well. The best gun in Warzone, in my opinion. I have spent a good amount of time testing this just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. This is the AUG with the 5.56 conversion. With the exception of the M4 with the SOCOM rounds, which I already said I eliminated from my list due to the low magazine capacity, the AUG with the 5.56 rounds has the highest damage per second value out of any of the assault rifles or SMGs, and it carries out to a decent range. It's accurate. You can use a 60 round drum mag with 5.56, and it's got the handling and mobility of an SMG. This is the perfect full auto weapon for Battle Royale. Nothing else competes with this gun. It decimates everything but shotguns up close. It really holds its power into the mid-range, and it's absolutely still usable at longer ranges as well. So this is the gun. If you guys haven't tried out the AUG with the 5.56 conversion within Warzone, do it right now, and I think you're going to be very, very pleasantly surprised. This gun just dominates, and it definitely deserves the number 1 spot on my list. But with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on the top 10 guns to use in Warzone. Now, one last thing I wanted to mention is just because a gun isn't on this list, that doesn't mean that it's not a good gun in Warzone. And also, it is fairly early on. Maybe at some point another gun will arise that turns out to be better than some of the other guns on this list that I just haven't discovered through my playtime and my deep dive through the statistics of the guns. So don't get too discouraged if you don't see your favorite gun on this list. I'm not saying it's necessarily a terrible gun, but overall, when you look at the statistics plus the in-game experience, these are my top 10 guns to use within Warzone. Of course, though, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about my list? Is there a gun that you were really thinking would be on this list but wasn't? And also, once you give that AUG with the 5.56 rounds a chance, let me know what you think of it. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.